The great hall of the Zephyrian royal palace stretched for nearly a kilometer, its crystalline walls refracting the light of 3 suns into brilliant rainbow patterns that danced across the assembled crowd. Representatives from every major species in the Galactic Confederation had gathered for what many considered the most important ceremony in 1,000 years. Princess Lyrelai of Zephyr stood at the center of the massive chamber, her translucent skin shimmering with the nervous energy that her species displayed during moments of great emotion. At 25 cycles old, she was considered young by Zephyrian standards, but her intelligence and diplomatic skills had already prevented 2 wars and negotiated 3 major trade agreements. Now, she faced a decision that would shape not just her future, but potentially the balance of power across the galaxy. The Zephyrian tradition of the choosing was ancient, dating back to when her people first reached for the stars. When a royal came of age, they would select a life bond from among the finest candidates presented by allied species. This bond was more than marriage. It was a political alliance, a sharing of knowledge, and a promise of cooperation between worlds. Ambassador Krex of the Moltor Empire stepped forward first, his massive form casting a shadow across the polished floor. The Moltors were known throughout the galaxy for their incredible strength and tactical brilliance. Wars were won by Moltor generals, and their technology in weapons and defense was unmatched. "Your Highness," Krex's voice boomed through the chamber, "I present Warlord Thane, victor of the Battle of Crimson Nebula, conqueror of 12 systems, and master of 17 forms of combat." The Moltor warrior beside him was impressive indeed. 3 meters tall, with armor that seemed to absorb light itself, and scars that told stories of countless victories. Princess Lyrelai nodded respectfully. Warlord Thane's reputation precedes him. The Confederation owes much to Moltor military might. Next came the ethereals, beings of pure energy contained within elegant crystalline forms. Their representative, a shimmering figure known as Resonance Prime, glided forward without touching the ground. We offer Mindsinger Vex, whose consciousness has touched the quantum foam itself. He has solved mathematical theorems that stumped our greatest scientists for centuries and can process information at speeds that approach light itself. The princess watched as Mindsinger Vex demonstrated his abilities, solving complex equations that appeared in holographic displays around the chamber. The calculations were beautiful, flowing like music made visible, and several gasps of admiration came from the crowd. The Aquatic Dominion sent their most celebrated explorer, Captain Reef Walker Naya, whose bioluminescent form pulsed with gentle blue light. She has mapped the deepest trenches of 40 water worlds and discovered 17 new forms of life, their ambassador proclaimed. Her knowledge of the galaxy's hidden places is unmatched. One by one, the greatest species presented their finest. The silicon-based architects showed holographic plans for megastructures that could house billions. The psionics demonstrated mental powers that could move mountains with thought alone. Each candidate was remarkable, representing the pinnacle of their species' achievements. Then came a moment of uncomfortable silence as Ambassador Chen of the Terran Federation approached the platform. Humans were the newest members of the Confederation, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. Their worlds were still developing, their technology primitive compared to species that had been exploring the galaxy for millennia. "Your Highness," Ambassador Chen said with diplomatic calm, despite the barely concealed smirks from some of the other delegates, "Earth presents its candidates." 3 humans stepped forward, and the contrast with the previous candidates was stark. They wore simple blue uniforms rather than elaborate armor or energy fields. They carried no visible weapons or technological marvels. To most observers, they looked almost comically ordinary. The eldest was Captain Sarah Mitchell, a woman in her 40s with graying hair and calm eyes. Captain Mitchell, Chen announced, has commanded humanity's deepest space explorations and established first contact protocols with dozen species. The second was Dr. James Park, a man in his 30s whose quick mind and innovative research had advanced human medicine by decades in just a few years. The third candidate caused several delegates to exchange puzzled glances. He appeared to be barely out of his teens with sandy brown hair and bright green eyes that held a hint of nervousness. He stood straight despite being the shortest of the three, and while the others carried themselves with the confidence of experience, he had the awkward energy of youth. "And this is Marcus Chen Okafor," the ambassador continued. "Our youngest space-qualified citizen at 19 years old. He has achieved remarkable theoretical breakthroughs in multidimensional physics and has spent more time in space than on any planet, including Earth." A ripple of barely suppressed laughter ran through parts of the crowd. The Moltor delegation didn't even try to hide their amusement. How could the humans seriously present someone barely out of childhood alongside seasoned warriors and ancient minds? Princess Lyrelay studied each candidate carefully. She had spent weeks reviewing the files of every delegate, learning about their achievements and their species' capabilities. The humans were puzzling. Their individual accomplishments were impressive given their species' brief time in space, but they seemed so small compared to the galactic powers around them. The ceremony proceeded with each candidate demonstrating their abilities. Warriors sparred with weapons that could slice through starship hulls. Scientists manipulated matter at the molecular level. Artists created beauty that moved beings to tears across species barriers. When the humans' turn came, they offered no flashy demonstrations. Captain Mitchell spoke quietly about the importance of understanding and patience in diplomacy. Dr. Park discussed his research into treating diseases that affected multiple species. Marcus, when his turn came, simply presented a small holographic model of the galaxy and pointed out patterns in stellar formation that others had missed. "This is interesting," he said, his young voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "But what's really fascinating is what happens in the spaces between. Most species focus on the matter, the stars, the planets, the obvious things. But the dark matter, the quantum fluctuations, the seemingly empty space, that's where the real action is. That's where the future is hiding." His presentation was brief and understated, but several of the scientist delegates leaned forward with interest. The physics were sound, even elegant, but coming from someone so young, many dismissed it as theoretical speculation. As the demonstrations concluded, Princess Lyrelay stood to address the assembly. The moment had come for her choice, and the political implications would ripple across thousands of worlds. Choosing the Moltors would strengthen military alliances, but might make other species nervous. The ethereals offered technological advancement, but were often difficult to understand. Each choice carried risks and benefits that could shape interstellar relations for generations. The princess looked out over the assembled candidates, her eyes moving from the imposing Moltor warrior to the shimmering ethereal mind singer, past the accomplished explorers and scientists and artists from across the galaxy. Then her gaze settled on the three humans standing quietly to one side. "I have considered carefully," she began, her voice amplified throughout the chamber. "This choice will affect not just my future, but the future of all our peoples. I have listened to the wisdom of ages, observed the strength of warriors, and marveled at the achievements of the greatest minds in the galaxy." She paused, and the silence stretched like a held breath across the vast space. "The candidate I choose is Marcus Chen Okafor of Earth." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Shocked gasps echoed through the chamber. Several delegates rose from their seats. The Moltor ambassador's face darkened with something approaching outrage, while other species representatives looked confused, as if they had misheard. "Your Highness," Ambassador Krex's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Surely you cannot be serious. This child has no experience, no proven achievements. How can he compare to the champions of our ancient civilizations?" The princess remained calm, despite the chaos erupting around her. "I am quite serious, Ambassador. My choice is made." Marcus himself looked stunned, his green eyes wide with disbelief. The other human candidates seemed as surprised as everyone else. Even Ambassador Chen appeared to struggle with maintaining his diplomatic composure. But why? The question came from Resonance Prime, their energy form flickering with confusion. "What does this young human possess that our greatest minds do not?" Princess Lyreley smiled, and for the first time since the ceremony began, she looked truly at ease. "That, honored delegates, is exactly what we are going to find out." The chamber erupted into 1,000 conversations as species representatives tried to understand what had just happened. Some were angry, feeling that their candidates had been insulted. Others were confused, wondering if there was some crucial information they were missing. A few looked thoughtful, remembering that the princess had never made a decision without good reason. Marcus stood frozen in place, still processing the fact that his life had just changed in ways he couldn't begin to comprehend. Around him, the greatest civilizations in the galaxy buzzed with shock and speculation, but in the midst of all the chaos, per the private chambers of Princess Lyreley, were a stark contrast to the grand hall where the ceremony had taken place. Here, the walls were simple and elegant, made from a mineral native to Zephyr that grew naturally into geometric patterns. The space felt intimate despite being larger than most homes, designed for quiet conversation rather than political spectacle. Marcus sat across from the princess, still wearing his simple blue uniform, still looking like he expected someone to tell him this was all a mistake. The shock hadn't worn off yet. 3 hours had passed since the announcement, and he still felt like he was dreaming. "You're wondering why?" Princess Lyreley said, pouring a clear liquid from a crystal decanter into 2 glasses. It was Zephyrian water, infused with minerals that created tiny sparkles as it moved. "The thought had crossed my mind," Marcus admitted, accepting the glass with hands that barely trembled. "I mean, Warlord Thane could probably arm-wrestle a battleship." "Mindsinger Vex can solve math problems that make my brain hurt just thinking about them. Captain Reefwalker has explored places I can't even pronounce. And you chose me." The princess studied him carefully. In the gentler light of her chambers, away from the intimidating grandeur of the ceremony, Marcus looked even younger. But there was something in his eyes. A quick intelligence, yes, but more than that. A way of looking at things that seemed to see past the obvious. "Tell me about your time in space," she said, instead of answering his unspoken question. Marcus blinked at the apparent change of subject, then shrugged. "I've lived on stations and ships since I was 12. My parents are both xenobiologists. They study alien life forms. We've moved around a lot, following their research. I've probably spent more time in zero gravity than I have on any planet." "That's unusual for your species, isn't it? Most humans still prefer planetary surfaces." "Yeah, definitely. Most of my friends from Earth think I'm crazy. They like having their feet on solid ground, but I guess I like the perspective you get in space. You can see how everything connects, how the big picture fits together." Princess Lyreley leaned forward slightly. "Show me what you mean." Marcus hesitated, then pulled out a small device that projected a holographic star map. With quick gestures, he zoomed in on the local stellar group. "See, everyone talks about individual systems, individual planets, like they're separate things, but look." His fingers danced through the projection, highlighting gravitational flows, magnetic fields, and the subtle dance of dark matter that most sensors couldn't even detect. It's all connected. The way stellar winds from this pulsar affect mineral formation in that asteroid belt 3 systems away. How the migration patterns of space-dwelling creatures follow magnetic currents that span hundreds of light years. Everything influences everything else, but most people only look at the parts they can see clearly. As he spoke, his nervousness faded, replaced by an enthusiasm that made his entire demeanor change. This was someone talking about something they genuinely loved, and Princess Lyreley found herself leaning in, caught up in his perspective. "That's very interesting," she said softly. "Now tell me, what do you see when you look at the current political situation in this sector?" Marcus paused, his hand still moving through the hologram. "You mean the tensions between the Moltor Empire and the Silicon Architects? Or the trade disputes between the Aquatic Dominion and the Ethereals?" "All of it." The young human was quiet for a long moment, his green eyes studying the patterns of light and space before him. "It's like everyone is playing separate games, but they're all on the same board. The Moltors focus on military strength because they remember the Void War from centuries ago. The Ethereals pursue pure knowledge because they've transcended physical needs. The Architects build because that's how they express their consciousness." He zoomed out, showing a broader view. "But they're all missing the connections. The Moltor's military strength depends on resources that come through architect-built trade routes. The Ethereal's research requires materials that the Aquatic Dominion mines from deep ocean worlds. Everyone needs everyone else, but they're all so focused on being the best at their specialty that they can't see the bigger pattern." Princess Lyreley felt a chill of recognition. In just a few sentences, this 19-year-old human had summarized political insights that had taken her years to develop. "And Earth's place in all this?" she asked quietly. Marcus's expression became more thoughtful. "That's the thing about being new. Everyone assumes you're insignificant because you haven't been here long. But sometimes the person who just walked into the room is the only one who can see that the house is on fire." Before the princess could respond, an urgent chiming filled the chamber. She touched a crystal panel on the wall, and the face of Admiral Zex, head of Zephyrian Defense, appeared in a holographic display. "Your Highness, we have a situation. Long-range sensors have detected an unknown vessel approaching the system. It's massive, easily 10 times the size of our largest battleship. It's not responding to communications, and it's heading directly for Zephyr Prime." Princess Lyreley stood quickly. "How long until it arrives?" 18 hours, assuming current speed and trajectory. Majesty, we've never seen anything like this. It doesn't match any known ship configuration in our databases. Assemble the Defense Council immediately. And Admiral..." She paused, glancing at Marcus. "Include the human delegation in the briefing." "Your Highness? With respect, the humans have no significant military..." "Include them, Admiral. That's an order." The hologram flickered off, leaving them in silence. Marcus had gone very still, and when the princess looked at him, she saw that the boyish uncertainty had been replaced by something sharper. "This isn't a coincidence, is it?" he said quietly. "The timing, I mean. The day after your choosing ceremony, an unknown ship appears." "What makes you say that?" Marcus gestured to the star map still floating between them. "Look at the approach vector. It's not coming from empty space. It's following the same route that all the diplomatic ships used to get here. Someone's been watching, waiting to see what choice you'd make." The Defense Council meeting was tense from the moment it began. Representatives from every major species crowded into the Zephyrian Military Command Center, their earlier celebration forgotten in the face of a potential threat. The massive holographic display in the center of the room showed the approaching vessel, and the size comparison with their own ships was sobering. Admiral Zex presented the tactical situation with military precision. The vessel is approximately 15 kilometers long and 5 kilometers wide. Its hull composition is unknown. Our sensors can't penetrate it. It's traveling at 0.7 light speed, which should be impossible without causing massive gravitational disruptions, but somehow it's maintaining a perfectly stable trajectory. Warlord Thane of the Moltors stepped forward, his armor gleaming under the harsh military lighting. My ships can be here in 6 hours. A full battle fleet with enough firepower to crack a moon. And if this vessel is peaceful? Princess Lyrelei asked. If we attack first, we could be starting a war with an unknown species. Better to fight from a position of strength, the Moltor replied grimly. Unknown vessels of this size are not usually diplomatic missions. Mind Singer Vex of the Ethereals flickered with calculated light patterns. I have run 17,000 probability simulations. The likelihood of this being a coincidence is less than 0.003%. This is clearly related to the choosing ceremony. Captain Reef Walker Naya pulsed with nervous bioluminescence. My people could evacuate the civilian populations to the deeper ocean cities. At least some would survive if this goes badly. Marcus had remained quiet throughout the discussion, standing slightly behind Ambassador Chen and the other human representatives. But as the debate continued, his expression grew more and more troubled. Excuse me, he said finally, his young voice cutting through the deeper tones of the older delegates. Can I see the long-range scan data? Several of the representatives looked annoyed at the interruption, but Princess Lyrelei nodded to Admiral Zex, who brought up additional displays showing sensor readings, trajectory analysis, and spectral data. Marcus studied the information for several minutes, his eyes moving quickly between different readouts. Then he frowned and asked, Admiral, can you show me the gravitational distortion patterns around the ship? The what? Warlord Thane rumbled. Boy, this is not the time for theoretical physics. But Admiral Zex was already pulling up the requested data. Here, though I'm not sure what you're looking for. The readings are unusual. Marcus stared at the patterns of gravitational distortion, his frown deepening. Then, suddenly, his face went very pale. Oh no, he whispered. Oh, this is very bad. What? Princess Lyrelei asked sharply. What do you see? Marcus turned to face the assembly, and everyone could see the fear in his green eyes. It's not a ship, he said quietly. It's a seed. A what? Several voices asked at once. Look at the gravitational patterns, Marcus said, pointing to the display. They're not random. They're structured like... He paused, trying to find words they would understand. Like biological processes. Like something growing. He manipulated the display, highlighting specific aspects of the sensor data. These energy readings, the way it's maintaining impossible speeds without affecting local space-time, it's not technology as we understand it. It's something else. Something that treats physics more like suggestions than laws. The chamber had gone completely silent. 15 kilometers long, Marcus continued, his voice growing steadier as he worked through the implications. But the gravitational mass suggests something much larger. It's compressed, folded in on itself. And if I'm right about what it is... He looked up at Princess Lyrelei. Your Highness, I think your planet is about to become someone's garden. The silence stretched even longer, until Warlord Thane's harsh laugh broke it. Ridiculous. You're seeing patterns that aren't there, boy. It's clearly a ship, and ships can be destroyed. But Princess Lyrelei was studying Marcus's face, remembering his words about seeing the connections others missed. Explain, she said simply. Marcus took a deep breath. What if there's a species out there that doesn't think like we do? What if they don't build technology? What if they grow it? What if their idea of colonization isn't conquering planets, but planting them with something that will transform the entire world into something more suitable for their needs? He gestured to the display showing the approaching object. 18 hours. That's not enough time for a military response, but it's exactly the right amount of time for something to take root in the planetary ecology. And the timing with your ceremony, they've been watching. They know that today is when all the major species are here, all the leadership in one place. Admiral Zex spoke into the growing silence. If you're correct, what would you recommend? Marcus looked around the room at beings who had lifetimes of experience he lacked, who commanded fleets and controlled the resources of entire worlds. Then he looked at Princess Lyralei, who had chosen him for reasons he was only beginning to understand. We need to think like humans, he said quietly. We need to be unpredictable. Princess Lyralei watched the young human with curious eyes. She had made her choice based on more than what others had seen. Now, she would learn whether her instincts were core. The hours that followed were unlike anything in recorded galactic history. As word of the approaching threat spread, the carefully orchestrated ceremony transformed into a crisis management center. Ships from a dozen species converged on the Zephyr system, but everyone knew that conventional weapons would be useless if Marcus was right about the nature of the object. Princess Lyralei found herself making decisions that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. Instead of relying on the proven military might of the Moltors or the ancient wisdom of the Ethereals, she had asked a 19-year-old human to coordinate the defense of her world. Marcus stood in the center of the command room, surrounded by holographic displays showing ship positions, planetary defenses, and the steadily approaching object that everyone had stopped calling a ship. His sandy hair was disheveled from running his hands through it, and his simple blue uniform was wrinkled from 12 hours of constant work. But his green eyes held a focus that commanded attention from beings who had been fighting wars since before Earth had developed writing. The key, he was explaining to the assembled fleet commanders, is that we're dealing with something that probably doesn't think like any of us. If this is really a biological seed designed to terraform planets, then it's not expecting resistance, it's expecting nutrients. Admiral Zex pulled up tactical displays showing the defensive formations. Our combined fleets represent the largest military force ever assembled in this sector. If traditional weapons won't work, they might make things worse, Marcus interrupted, and several of the commanders bristled at being cut off by someone so young. Think about it. What happens when you attack a seed? If you damage it without destroying it completely, it starts growing faster. It thinks it's under environmental stress. Captain Sarah Mitchell, the human officer who should have been Marcus's senior in any reasonable chain of command, stepped forward. What are you proposing? Marcus turned to the main display, manipulating it to show the object's approach trajectory. We make it think Zephyr Prime isn't suitable for whatever it's trying to grow. We don't attack it. We confuse it. How? Princess Lyralei asked. She had been watching Marcus work for hours now, and she was beginning to understand why her instincts had chosen him. It wasn't his knowledge or his experience. It was the way his mind approached problems from directions that others couldn't see. We changed the planet's signature, Marcus said, his excitement growing as the plan took shape in his mind. Everything that's alive gives off specific energy patterns, chemical signatures, quantum resonances. If this thing is coming here because Zephyr Prime looks like good soil for whatever they want to plant, we make it look like terrible soil. Warlord Thane had been silent for most of the discussion, but now he spoke up with obvious skepticism. And how exactly does a human child propose to change the signature of an entire planet? Marcus grinned, and for a moment his youth showed clearly. We use the fact that everyone thinks humans are insignificant. The plan that emerged over the next few hours was so audacious that it would have been dismissed as impossible if anyone other than humans had proposed it. It relied on three things that other species considered weaknesses: humanity's technological primitiveness, their lack of specialization, and their tendency toward reckless improvisation. Dr. James Park, the human medical researcher, worked with ethereal scientists to synthesize compounds that would mimic the chemical signatures of planets hostile to most known forms of life. Captain Mitchell coordinated with the Aquatic Dominion to seed the oceans with mineral compositions that would suggest toxic waters. But the core of the plan required something that only humans could provide. "You want us to do what?" Ambassador Krex of the Moltors stared at Marcus as if the young human had suggested setting the planet on fire. "Jury-rig every piece of technology in the system," Marcus repeated calmly. "All of it. Human tech, Moltor military equipment, ethereal research devices, aquatic deep-sea sensors, everything. We're going to make the most chaotic, unharmonious, completely unnatural electromagnetic signature possible." "That would disrupt everything," Mind Singer Vex pointed out, their crystalline form flickering with alarm. "Communications, navigation, life support systems." "Exactly," Marcus said. "We make Zephyr Prime look like the most unsuitable place in the galaxy for any kind of natural growth. Not dangerous in a way that would make a seed want to fight. Just wrong. Like trying to plant a flower in solid metal." What happened next became known in galactic history as the Great Harmony Disruption. Every species contributed technology they had never intended to work together. Moltor military sensors were linked to ethereal quantum computers through human-built interface systems that shouldn't have been capable of handling the power loads. Aquatic bioluminescent communication arrays were networked with silicon architect crystal matrices using connection protocols that Dr. Park invented on the spot. The result was glorious chaos. The electromagnetic signature of the Zephyr system became a cacophony of conflicting signals that painted the planet as a technological nightmare, a world where artificial systems had grown so invasive and dominant that nothing natural could possibly survive. Marcus coordinated it all from the command center, his hands moving through holographic controls as he fine-tuned the discordant symphony of incompatible technologies. He was in his element now, and watching him work, Princess Lyreley finally understood what she had sensed during the ceremony. This wasn't about age or experience. This was about a fundamentally different way of seeing problems. "Status report!" she called out as the object drew closer. 3 hours to contact," Admiral Zex reported. "All systems are operating far outside normal parameters, but they're holding together. The planet's signature has changed by 97%, Dr. Park added, monitoring the readings from a dozen different sensor arrays. "If this thing is looking for biological compatibility, we must look like the least suitable world in the galaxy right now." Princess Lyreley moved to stand beside Marcus as he worked. "I have to ask," she said quietly. "How did you know this would work?" Marcus glanced at her, his hands never stopping their work. "I didn't," he admitted. "But that's kind of the point. Everyone else was thinking like their species thinks. Moltors wanted to fight it. Ethereals wanted to understand it first. Aquatics wanted to hide from it. All logical responses based on millions of years of evolutionary programming." He gestured to the chaos of mismatched technology around them. "But humans, we're new to all this. We don't have millions of years of proper ways to do things. When we see a problem, we just try stuff. Weird stuff. Stupid stuff sometimes. Stuff that shouldn't work but does anyway because the universe has a sense of humor." The princess nodded slowly. "You're saying that our greatest strength is that we don't know what's impossible yet." "Something like that," Marcus agreed. "Plus, we're really good at breaking things in creative ways." The final hour was tense beyond description. The object, now clearly visible to the naked eye as something that defied every principle of ship design, approached Zephyr Prime while every sensor in the system tracked its behavior. It had begun to slow, which was encouraging, but whether that meant it was losing interest or preparing to deploy was impossible to know. Then, with just minutes to spare, something unexpected happened. The object stopped. It hung in space 50,000 kilometers from Zephyr Prime, close enough to be a threat, but far enough to suggest hesitation. For long minutes, nothing happened. Then, slowly, it began to change course. "It's turning away," Admiral Zex reported, his voice filled with disbelief. "Its new trajectory will take it out of the system entirely." A cheer went up from the command center, but Marcus held up a hand for silence. "Wait," he said, studying the sensor readings. "Something's happening." As they watched, the object began to emit a series of complex energy pulses, patterns too organized to be random, too intricate to be simple communication attempts. "It's trying to talk," Captain Reefwalker Naya said with wonder. "I've never seen patterns like these, but it's definitely structured communication." Mindsinger Vex focused their considerable mental capabilities on the patterns. "It's apologetic? I think it's expressing regret for the intrusion and curiosity. It wants to know what kind of beings could create such beautiful chaos." Marcus stared at the readings, then began to laugh. "It likes what we did. It thinks the electromagnetic mess we made is some kind of art form." Over the next several days, as the various fleets dispersed and the jury-rigged technology was slowly returned to normal operation, the full implications of what had happened began to sink in. The object, which they learned was indeed a seed from a species calling themselves the Gardeners, had departed peacefully, leaving behind only a complex message of gratitude and artistic appreciation. More importantly, word of the crisis and its resolution spread throughout the Galactic Confederation with unprecedented speed. The youngest member species, considered primitive and unremarkable just days before, had saved one of the most important worlds in the galaxy using nothing but creative thinking and a willingness to break every rule of proper technological integration. Princess Lyralay stood once again in her private chambers, but this time she wasn't alone with Marcus. Ambassador Chen was there, along with representatives from several major species who had come to discuss new trade agreements, technology-sharing pacts, and military cooperation treaties. Humanity's status in the galaxy had changed overnight. "I think I'm beginning to understand," Marcus said when they had a moment alone. "You didn't choose me because you thought I was the best candidate. You chose me because you knew something was coming that would require a different kind of thinking." The princess smiled, her translucent skin shimmering with contentment. "I chose you because my advisors had been telling me for months about strange sensor readings at the edge of our space. Ships that appeared and disappeared, always staying just out of clear detection range. I knew someone was watching us, waiting for something. The choosing ceremony would have been the perfect time to strike, when all our allies' leadership was in one place." She gestured to the holographic star chart that still dominated one wall of her chamber. "Every other candidate would have responded to that threat the way their species always responds. But humans do the impossible by accident on a regular basis. I was counting on that." Marcus shook his head in wonder. "So you gambled the fate of your entire planet on the hope that human unpredictability would somehow save the day." "Not hope," Princess Lyralay corrected. "Certainty. You see, Marcus, I've been studying human behavior since first contact. Do you know what your species' greatest achievement has been in your short time in space?" No, not really. You've made first contact with 17 different species. 17. Most species manage 2 or 3 peaceful first contacts in their entire history. You've never started a war, never conquered anyone, never imposed your culture on others. But in every single case, you found ways to work with beings that couldn't be more different from you. She touched the star chart, highlighting the various human exploration routes. Other species excel at one thing: combat, or science, or art, or exploration. Humans excel at being adaptable. at finding connections between things that shouldn't connect, at making impossible things work just well enough to solve the immediate problem. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, absorbing the implications. You're saying that humanity's role in the galaxy isn't to be the strongest or the smartest. Your role, Princess Lyrelei said with a smile, is to be the species that everyone else calls when the impossible needs to happen. And judging by the messages I've been receiving from other worlds, you're going to be very busy. Outside the palace windows, the 3 suns of Zephyr were setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. Ships from a dozen worlds moved through the orbital traffic patterns, and among them, flying with new respect and recognition, were vessels bearing the blue and white symbols of Earth. The galaxy had learned something important about its newest members, and humanity, for the first time since reaching for the stars, truly knew where they belonged in the vast community of worlds. Marcus Chen Okafor, the youngest human chosen by an alien princess, stood watching the sunset and thinking about the future. Tomorrow there would be new problems to solve, new impossibilities to make possible, and new ways to prove that sometimes the best solution to any problem was to think like a human. He was looking forward to it, ECT, or whether she had just made the most costly mistake in her planet's history. The real test was yet to come, yet to